Welcome. My name is Peter Meissen. I'm the director here at the Sim Center, and most of you, I think, have been here before. Have you guys been here before? Okay, great. Well, let's do an introduction of what this place is, and then a little background of the event that we're having here this evening, and introduce our speakers and let them get going. The Sim Center is a place to visualize sustainable solutions. So this is patterned after some thinking of a man named Buckminster Fuller. What's Bucky most well known for? Geodesic domes, right? We've all seen those in playgrounds. They surround the radar installations of the world. And he said we needed a place to get together to grapple with the hard issues of our day. So this is patterned after that thinking. This is just a prototype. So it's not the end visualization space. We're actually soon looking like we're moving up to Silicon Valley to do something that's 5 times this size, digital floor, digital screens all the way around. And we've had a great local impact here, but we're not making a global impact, and that's what it's meant to do. So this is a place to visualize sustainable solutions to global and local problems so we make smarter decisions quicker. So that's our mission, and the idea is to help you visualize the trends on an issue. How did we get to where we are today? Do you want to understand the history, to understand the current condition? But what we're most interested in is where we're headed, the options and projections going forward, so we can understand costs and consequences of different choices. Again, so we make smarter decisions quicker. So that's the Sim Center in short, and we've been doing things here for the last 5 years, events called the Green Scene, 100% Renewable San Diego, movies that make a difference. We rent the place out for people that want to use it themselves for a business meeting or a strategic planning event. So that's the usages of the place. It was born originally from Bucky's proposal for the World Game. The World Game asked the question, how do you provide a decent living standard for everybody sustainably? That's a shortened version of that World Game mission statement. And our work for the 25 years has been the #1 strategy of that has to do with linking renewable resources around the world. So whether you do it on your rooftop, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight, or big solar or wind farms over in the desert, we're advocates of that. How do you transition our city, our state, our country, our world to really a world dominated by renewables and a lot less fossil fuel? So that's the mission that we're on. Tonight we do this partnership with the San Diego Renewable Energy Society, and when we have in San Diego a unique distinction where our city is committed to be 100% renewable by 2035. We're the biggest city in America that's made that pledge, and that's made the New York Times and the Guardian and around the world. So there's a lot of attention on that pledge, and it's not an impossible task because we've had the 4 other cities in California that have already reached 100% by different methods. So if they can do it, we can do it too. We just happen to be the biggest city so far to make that pledge. So we partner with the Renewable Energy Society and 3 other organizations around that, the Climate Action Campaign, U.S. Green Chamber San Diego, and the Equinox Project. So those are the partners in that activity. Tonight we're going to look at really the economics of solar PV on your roof. How do you reduce your energy costs, add value to your home? There's just such a great opportunity now to, instead of your roof being a sink, to being a source. And I'm a advocate of that because one of our speakers tonight, Michael, is a board member for our organization. He works for a company that's a leading company in this space. Stellar Solar actually is sponsoring this evening, so you see their logos around. So thank you, Michael, and Stellar Solar for doing that. His introduction, just to give it a little bit of a preface, I got a call from Michael probably 20 or 25 years ago. He was in Florida, and he said, what are you doing out there in California? And I just started on this Genie initiative, and he liked it, and he was writing about it in the Florida Business Journal. And he came out here and found out it was just a one-man operation at that point in time in a small office, and so there wasn't any way to hire him. But he was very committed, and if you go back, not how many years, 10 years, 15 years, he said, you'll know when this thing is real, this solar thing is real, is when you can go down to Home Depot, pick up a phone number, get an 800 number, get the Home Depot seal of approval. And this is the guy that did that. So before anybody else was doing it, he got Home Depot to set that program up. It was throughout the Southland, and that's when I knew, boy, this is a guy that's more than committed. He's passionate and going to make this real in the world. And now he's leading one of the leading solar companies here in San Diego, and he'll tell you their story. We also have Keri Helmer. right? And I don't know her whole background, but she works with Center for Sustainable Energy, and they are the leading organization in I don't know if it's in the country, but certainly in California, that manages all the rebate programs. If you get a car and you get a rebate, like an electric car, you get a $2,500 rebate through that organization after you fill out the forms for buying an EV. Or if you put, I know there's many other programs that have to do with insulation and windows. They manage all of those for San Diego, the Southern California region, all the SDG&E region, and now they have operations in Northern California, Hawaii, and Massachusetts, I think, as well. Boston, yeah. So with Len Herring, Admiral Len Herring as their director, it's expanded dramatically in our city, and it's really not just a city organization, it's a national organization. So Keri represents that, and she will tell you the story of all the different programs that they manage, and that's why we're thrilled to have you here, Michael, to do the story about when you actually get it on your rooftop, how it's going to make and save you money. So that's, and I'll be an advocate for that, or at least testify on my own experience, because I know you can zero out your electricity bill because I can show it to you. So that's pretty cool. Before we get fully started, they wanted to know who's in the room tonight real quickly. So can you go around real quick and introduce yourself? And maybe if you're looking, or if you have anything specific about what the questions you want to ask, then please do that. You have to use the mic.
Hi, my name is Josh. My girlfriend invited me to come. I'm interested, and I'm excited to learn.
Good evening. My name is Mercedes. Josh and I are here to learn a lot more about the solar initiative. We'd actually like to build an off-the-grid home out in East County. So we're currently looking for a piece of land, and we're just getting started. So we have long-term plans and interests, and I wouldn't mind getting involved in off-the-grid housing development later on in my life after we build our little prototype and see how successful that is. So yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Michael Decker. I'm the IT director here at the Sim Center.
Dan Hendrickson, president of Libre Energy. I dabble in solar PV, solar hot water, waste to energy, and cleaning up wastewater, and anything else that you desire.
Hello, everybody. Thanasi Glavis, former volunteer and employee of the Sim Center and Genie, and currently just a concerned citizen and supporter of renewable energy on a global scale.
I'm Karen, and I have an interest in sustainable energy. I think that's the way of the future. I think we're going to have to do it at some point, have everybody on solar or some other kind of alternative energy. So I'm here for interest.
I'm Arnaud, a GIS specialist and volunteer here at Genie.
Hey, I'm Joe, interested in solar energy and supportive husband.
Michael, you go ahead.
Mike Russell, volunteer, AV.
Hi, I'm Stina. I'm a volunteer here at Jenny, and I'm also the project manager of 100% Renewable San Diego. Yeah.
And a math wizard working on our Genie model. So that's very nice. Thanks, Stina.
Okay, I'm Amanda, and I come to see the most up-to-date information.
I'm Anthony. I wandered in here 2 days ago. I work for Solar Alliance, and my job is to talk to a couple hundred people a day about trying to make the switch to solar. So I'm just looking for more talking points and more information that I could pass on to the potential clients that I speak to.
Very nice. All right, so that's who's in the room. Does that give you a little bit of sense of who's here, Michael and Keri? All right, great. So you get to introduce yourself a little bit more, since I didn't have much of an introduction for you. And we're going to run around the room, Stina and I, and we're going to help. We have the presentation that we have set up. It's all the way around the room in a 1 through 12 setup. So we kind of let the presenter make their presentation and then have a little dialogue and questions after those first 12 slides. And then we shift to the next 12, okay? She has a pretty long slideshow, so we'll get through it as quickly as you'd like, all right? Okay, there you go.
Good evening. My name is Keri Helmer. I'm from the Center for Sustainable Energy. We're a nonprofit headquartered here in San Diego, but we also have offices in LA, Oakland, Boston, etc. If we could bring up the slides when you have a moment, we could tell you a little bit more about what we do and why we do it. There we are. Our mission is to accelerate the transition to a sustainable world powered by clean energy. And we do this a number of different ways. We administer energy programs, for example, California Solar Initiative, Clean Vehicle Rebate Program. We offer technical assistance to industry, managers, etc., and training and education, outreach to homeowners, business owners, anyone who needs our help. The areas we work in are renewable energy, electric vehicles, building performance, self-generation, energy storage, and energy efficiency. So as I said, we administer the California Solar Initiative for the SDG&E territory. California Solar Initiative was a program administered by all three IOUs, SCE, PG&E, and SDG&E. And what this did was provide solar rebates in order to help accelerate the market for renewables. And CSE was the program administrator for SDG&E. The other two PAs administered their own programs. It took over $2 billion in a budget over 10 years and the goal was to reach about 1,900 megawatts of renewable capacity, the goal was to reach that by the end of 2016, which we actually have already. Okay, thank you. So the CSI program covered both solar PV, electric, and solar water heating or thermal. Also, there was components for SASH and MASH, which are single family and multifamily solar affordable housing, and a little bit of money for R&D. Alternately, those are all for existing homes. New Solar Homes Partnership is administered by the CEC, and I've included contact information there if you need to look into new homes installation. The current incentive programs for existing homes are closed for all three IOUs, unfortunately, but the upside is that, I'm sorry? Independent operated utility, PGE, SCE, SDG&E. But the upside to the incentive program being finished is that the total cost has gone down dramatically, which we'll see in a later slide. So this is just some basic information about energy. A watt, you're probably most familiar with a light bulb. So this is how we measure PV in kilowatts and watts. And if we use a kilowatt over an hour's period of time, we call it a kilowatt hour. That's how you're going to be billed on your SDG&E bill. A therm, I'm approaching that because we'll be talking a little bit about solar water heating, and that's how gas is measured in BTUs. And the last slide is an SDG&E energy bill. And if I can get this to work. In the center here, you'll see your energy billed in therms and kilowatts with the dollar amount. And then on the far right, kind of a history of your usage.
Okay, any questions about that so far? Were you all good with that? Sort of the introduction of who they are and basics around therms and watts. We all good? Dan?
Is there any initiative underway to basically equate, I mean, we can go online and find out what therms and watts are going to cost in the way of carbon emissions, but they could probably print it on the bill.
I don't think they would want to, but they could. Good point, though.
So how much pollution in every watt or therm or...
Yeah, that might be painful for them.
Yeah, yeah. All right, we good? So we're going to transition. I know, Thanasi, you don't have to... Can you do the 1 and 3 for us, Thanasi? So what you have to do is you have to count to 12. Okay. Down button, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Same thing there. Down button, count.
It's a group effort.
Don't have to go fast, just have to be accurate.
You could probably start changing the first ones then when I'm going through. So on the right is another way to look at your energy use. This would be on your SDG&E account online. You would look under My Energy, My Bill Details, and then Usage Details. The second slide shows the total usage. And this is important because when you're estimating your system size for PV, you'll want to look at an annual usage of kilowatt hours. The next slide is a little dim, but it says reduce your use before you produce. And that ties in with your annual energy use because, for example, let's say we have 2 identical homes and they're owned by Peter and myself, and we both moved from out of state into San Diego. We live on the same street with the same size home, same orientation to the sun. We both have approximately 2,000 square foot homes. We both started our electric bill with SDG&E in the same day. One might think that our electric bills would be similar, perhaps even identical. But what you didn't factor in is our behaviors. Peter is from Arizona, and I'm from Alaska. So our energy use and needs are going to be much different. So in the very warm seasons, he's from Arizona, it's fine for him. He'll just be opening his windows. I'm sweating. I'll be using my electricity and getting a higher bill. In the winter, it'll be the opposite, where somebody from Arizona might be using their electric thermostat quite a bit and getting a much higher bill than me. So it's really important to look at your annual usage, not seasonal or monthly usage, in order to determine what your net would be. Additionally, it's really important to look at your personal use and how you can reduce it, and your building envelope, how your home is sealed before installing PV. Because those two are a bigger factor. A lot of people think it's the square footage available on your roof, but really the factors would be your behavior and your home itself, the building envelope that would allow you to downsize a system if you had those 2 factors under control. If you could downsize a system, it would cost you less upfront and you'd get a quicker return on your investment. Size would be a factor if you had gables or chimneys or things like that. However, more efficient components could also be a factor in helping you overcome those issues. So we always say reduce your use before you produce. So reduce your energy use before you produce electricity with PV. So home energy efficiency measures. This is a website. It's our website. It gives you very simple tips on how to do very simple to a little bit more complex upgrades. It helps you with finding contractors, rebates, and financing. The next slide is actually SDG&E's home energy audit, while you're getting your consumption, annual consumption online from SDG&E, you might as well go to the home energy audit and see what you can do there to reduce your use. And then finally, if you need something more advanced, there's a home upgrade program offered by EUC. It's a really great program. They'll help you with qualified contractors. They'll come to your home, do an energy audit. Their goal is to control the temperature in your home, and they'll try to increase your energy efficiency by at least 10%. There are incentives available for this between $1,000 and $6,500 based on the pre and post install audits. And if you need to go further, there's an advanced home energy upgrade which aims to increase your efficiency of your home by 45%. This is just a quick slide on how PV works. Obviously, the sun hits the panels. The panels hold DC energy. It's pulled into the inverter, which is where it's converted to AC, which is what you use in your home or on the grid. The grid being a collection of generation, distribution, transmission lines. The AC energy can then be sent to the grid or into your home for your components. Keep in mind that your components are drawing or pulling electricity normally from the grid without solar, and that even when you're not home, your components have a phantom load, we call it. Your clocks, your timers, your VCRs, DVRs. And then on the next slide, we're talking about solar cells. It's just basically silicone. A collection of cells is a module or panel, and a number of panels is an array. There are a number of different types of panels. Crystalline, which is what you most commonly see, a bluish, blackish colored. These have a lot of uses. You can use them on the roof, on the ground, carports, etc. These panels are great. They're cost effective. Sometimes because they are the way they're wired, shade can reduce the performance. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Alternative panel options are BIPV, which is building integrated PV, or thin film. They're flexible, amorphous. They're aesthetically pleasing. Oftentimes they're used on higher quality buildings, and they're less cost effective for what you get. A lot of times people ask us how to compare modules. This is a great website. It shows you a number of options. You just click on it. The results on the right is what I pulled up. I just pulled up a variety of 4 different modules. And it's basically going to show you all sorts of things, the electrical components, mechanical characteristics, warranty, and certifications. And the 1, 2, 3, 4th-ish line down shows the peak efficiency for each one. 14.5 to 19. Yeah, I tried to get them in the same range. Different. Mm-hmm.
Questions around these?
Just one quick question. Longest track record over 50 years? Is that for the panels themselves? The panel will last 50 years.
It's been on the market for over 50 years.
Oh, it's been on the market for 50 years. Okay.
The materials of that panel.
How do you plan for an electric vehicle?
We'll talk about that toward the end of the presentation. We have some slides.
Okay, very good. I think we started a convert. Anybody else on that first? Okay, Dan?
I'm wondering if you are doing any work with single-axis or two-axis trackers.
We don't personally do any installs. What we basically...
No, just talking about calculations.
We don't. we have colleagues who are doing that right now, looking at different arrays and tracking procedures. There are a number of different professors actually in San Diego that are doing studies, and their students are doing studies as well. So it's quite a great place to be working in solar.
Sorry, just one other quick question. The alternative panel options, are those actually on the market right now?
Yeah,
And
certainly.
What's the cost comparison? Is it like 3-4 times as much?
I don't know. We might want to ask the contractor.
They're a lot less expensive, but they're a lot less efficient.
Okay.
They're about half as efficient as solar.
Okay, so you need like twice as much. Okay.
All right, good. So we've started to convert. We'll go around the rest of the room and finish those. You can keep going.
Okay, great. So just as a quick reminder, the inverter is the box that's going to convert the DC electricity from the panels into usable electricity for your home or the grid. There are generally two types of inverters, central and micro. Central inverter is going to be the one box system that you're used to seeing a lot of times around town. It's going to be on the side of the house or the side of the garage near the electric panel. Some pros and cons. With the central inverter, there's going to be one central point of failure. So if something's wrong with the system, you'll know. Unfortunately, the contractor or electrician will have to backtrack to find which panel might be out of order. But it's been on the market a little bit longer than microinverters. Shading can affect central inverters because it's wired in series. So if one panel is shaded, your overall production will drop slightly. With a central inverter, because you have all your panels connected to the one box, it doesn't allow for easy system size increases that exceed the size of your current inverter. So worst case scenario, if you wanted to add additional panels and your system was already sized to your inverter, you'd have to purchase another inverter. And warranty can be shorter than microinverters. Generally, we like to see at least 10 years. Here's another page of comparisons. So I use the bottom link to look at the inverter comparison results here. And it's hard to see, but it looks at electrical properties, mechanical characteristics, environmental constraints, warranties, and AC electrical properties. And in the under the second blue line, the fourth line down talks about peak efficiencies and weighted efficiencies. These are the inverters. These are the comparisons. These are just three general ones that I chose out of a list of hundreds. Peak efficiency is what we'd like to see coming out of the product. Weighted efficiency is more of a realistic expectation, but really it's all above 95%, I believe, on these three. So it's 94 or something. Pretty strong.
Is that the microinverter we're talking about?
I don't. These are just inverters in general.
So one inverter for the whole panel.
So a central inverter is one inverter for all the panels. I'm sorry, I didn't explain microinverters. Microinverters is a small box on the back of each panel. There was a picture of it. I'm not sure what happened to it in the slide deck. That's why I got out of order. I'm so sorry. So say for the example on the inverter, here. Okay, so, so for example, these little green boxes will actually be attached to the back of the blue or black panels. But that's a monitoring, that's not the right slide either. We've jumped ahead slightly. But anyway, so microinverters would have each of these inverters attached to the back of the panel on your roof. So it's easy to add additional panels if necessary because the inverter is already incorporated into the panel. Here's the real life example. So these are the inverters already racked out on your roof, and the panels will just be attached over the top. And this is the back side with the inverter behind the panel. And then the comparison, I don't recall if I chose any microinverters or only central inverters, but you have a ton of options to choose from this particular website, and the link is included. Let's see. So with microinverters, one of the benefits is you'll have a built-in monitoring system. So this display is probably the size of a hand, and it'll be in your home near your computer system, and you will be able to monitor your production from each panel for the entire system on an hourly, daily, weekly, monthly basis, whatever you'd like to do. So it's really nice for techie people and people who want to ensure their system is producing properly. Also, your contractor can link into it. And third-party monitoring systems are available on the market.
And I'll show you my personal example of that later, okay? So you can actually see my production today.
Which is a really neat thing. The next slide is Solar Rights and Shade Acts. It's not something you need to know about per se, but if you have problems with HOA or neighbors, etc., there are rules and laws to protect you and your rights. How to find a contractor. A lot of people want to know. This is a really handy site. You can type in zip code, city, county, utility, all of California, distance, and then the results page, I took out the names, but it'll have name, contact information, etc. But it will tell you whether it was third-party owned, what system size they installed. Like this one's 129 kilowatts, but a more general one would be about 6 or 5. And then what was the cost per watt? The cost per watt is what we recommend at CSC you use to compare your bids. We ask you to get a minimum of 3 bids from different contractors. The reason being, everyone's got a different perspective. Some might offer you microinverters or central inverters or different types of racking or et cetera. But if you take the watt and the cost, you're going to get, it's going to level the playing field, so to speak, and you'll be able to compare them all on an even basis. Any questions about that? Yes, sir.
With the microinverters, my assumption is that they're going to degrade in efficiency as they heat up. Is that correct?
Everything's going to degrade, but it's not going to be...
No, I'm just saying as a general law of physics. I happen to like microinverters, and we have a scheme for circulating air from the air conditioning system underneath the array that's going to cool them.
That's brilliant.
Well, it's not brilliant.
It's logical, yes, of course.
Yeah. Anyway, I was wondering if there's any data taken on degradation of microinverters compared to their temperature.
There's some studies. I don't have the data with me. Michael, do you know?
Not in the form that you're looking for.
Okay. We can talk offline.
We'll touch back.
Yeah.
Okay. What's really important when you're researching solar contractors is to talk to your friends, neighbors, coworkers, anyone who might have already installed or talked to other contractors. We definitely suggest you go to the CSLB and the BBB. The reasons being, when you go to the Contractor State License Board, you'll just need a little bit of information about the contractor, either their license number, their business name, or their personal name. And you can just type it in the slot, depending on which button you click on. And that'll bring up their license, whether it should be active and green. It'll talk about their insurance, workman's comp, etc. If there's any problems with the contractor, it'll list it there as far as California is considered. The BBB is a really great website to learn about what other homeowners consider important or derogatory about a particular contractor. The slides are a little dim, but this is the website, and this is what I did. I didn't have to type in a particular contractor name. I just typed Solar Contractor San Diego. And this is the search I came up with. I clicked on a particular solar contractor, and I got customer complaint summary, 402 complaints filed with the BBB in the last 3 years. And what this does is allows me to go, I want you to be informed consumers, It allows you to look at what type of complaint they had: advertising, sales, billing, collection, delivery, warranty, problems with product or service. And then the number shows you how many there were. But what's best is you can click on these numbers. For example, the next slide, let me move over, I'm sorry. And it will tell you the date of the complaint and what the complaint was. So the first blue section is complaint resolution logs. These are things that the customer said, okay, I think the contractor dealt with. And then the bottom section is the business addressed the issues, but the consumer did not accept the response, or BBB did not hear back from the consumer. So again, where it says read complaint details, you can click on that, and it will be paragraphs worth of information in the homeowner's own words about what this contractor did or didn't do for them. Granted, the name will be blocked out, so you can't see it was Phil, but you'll get a really good idea of how homeowners truly feel about their contractors. Yes?
And Keri, how many contractors are there in San Diego?
Hundreds, thousands.
Hundreds?
Yeah, most likely. But this
Yeah,
is
I
one.
meant, yeah,
This
specific
is
solar
one solar contractor.
Yes, but
This
there's
is
several hundred in San Diego alone.
contractors.
Contractors. It'll put it on your roof.
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Was there a question in the back?
Isn't it true that the Better Business Bureau was sold and made into a for-profit PR company a few years ago?
Ooh. I would like to know the answer to that myself. I would wonder how they're for profit if there's all these negative consumer complaints. Could be, but you can still read them. So I think it's still a valuable resource in that respect.
And you picked an
Yeah.
example with 400. That's a lot of complaints, isn't it?
That's one contractor.
Yes. Isn't that a lot of complaints for a contractor?
I would think so.
Yeah.
But remember, I mean, pros and cons, right? Who's going to take the time to write a comment? Somebody who's really happy or somebody who's really dissatisfied? So keep that in mind. Talk to people who you know who've actually had installations done by that contractor.
Okay.
Does it show you how many they've had in that in total?
It can. There are also a previous website that we had up will show you how many they've done. Oh, we took it down. How many they've done in the area based on system size, et cetera. You can do a zip code search.
Okay, cool.
Okay, net metering. So net energy metering is the policy that allows you to, as a solar producer, return any excess production to the grid and allows you to pull it back at a later date when you need to use it. Also allows you to sell at the end of 1 year any excess production back to the utility. And this is what the policy is that helped invigorate the renewables market here in San Diego and elsewhere. The reason that energy metering is important, remember the story about Arizona and Alaska earlier in the presentation. This is a typical consumption pattern for any homeowner in the middle with the graph. As you can see, the consumption is in red, and the production, which you're getting from your system, is in green. So in the first few months, you're overproducing, which is a good thing for you because you can store those credits for later, pull them back when you need them. Particularly when you hit this area in June, July, August, maybe you had out-of-town guests, you clicked on your AC, you bought an EV. Any of these reasons could be why you have overconsumed. But what you're allowed to do is take these credits from the previous month and apply them basically to these bills. And what's going to happen at the end of the very end of the year, whether it's not the end of the year technically, it's the 12-month period from when you did your installation of your solar. When you interconnected with the utility, they'll send you a letter saying it's possible now to interconnect, which means you can turn on the system. 12 months from that date, whether it's December or May to June, it doesn't matter. They'll then send you a true-up bill, which is where they'll do the net allowance, whether you overproduced or overconsumed. You overproduced, they'll give you a credit. You overconsumed, they'll send you a bill. Just so you know, every month SDG&E will send you a notification. It'll say it's not a bill. A lot of people think it's a bill because it looks like a bill. You don't have to pay every month. You can choose to, but because we talked about different seasonal patterns and behavioral patterns, it's best to wait to the end of that true-up period, the 12 months, in order to actually true up with the utility. And what is the utility going to pay you? So currently it varies month to month. The purchase price hovers around 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Keep in mind that the retail rate is for Tier 1, 18 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's a lot different than what you're paying them if you're pulling from the grid. But it's still compensation. And the idea isn't necessarily to make money by overproducing with solar. It's to offset your electricity bill and perhaps make a tiny bit if you are overproducing. What's really important with SDG&E is there's a minimum bill charge. It used to be $5. It's recently gone up to $10 per month. So even if you are overproducing and you don't owe them anything as an electric bill, you'll still owe them a minimum of $10 per month, so a maximum of $120 per month if you are overproducing constantly. So you'll still owe the utility something, unfortunately. Changes to net energy metering. So, yep.
Is that $10 a month different than the $10 a month that every home has to pay as an interconnection?
No. Everyone has to pay a minimum of $10. Unless you're on the care plan, and then it'd be half. It'd be $5.
Okay, so the overgeneration aspect of that statement, though, isn't relative or related?
It is, because people think if you overproduce, you won't owe the utility anything. I'm telling you, if you overproduce, you'll still owe them a minimum of $10 per month.
Oh, okay, so okay, yeah.
Okay, so net energy, there's two factors when considering a utility. One would be the policy, which is net energy metering, which is what allows you to sell excess production back to the grid. The second would be the rates, which is the dollar amounts that you're paying. So a lot of things happened at the end of last year. Changes to net energy metering and changes to rates both happened at the same time, so a lot of people confuse the two. And it is a little bit daunting, but I'm going to try to walk you through it as best I can. So net energy metering policy, we call it NEM1. It's just jargon we use in the industry. It's not technically what it's called. But it's going to end in July of 2017, or when SDG&E's renewables reach 5% of their entire megawatt capacity, whichever comes first. So because we're solar heavy in San Diego, SDG&E is actually going to reach this capacity they anticipate in July of this year. Yes, question in the back?
That's not 5% of their total megawatt capacity. That's independent rooftop homeowner solar reaching 5%.
No, it's all renewables.
Really?
Yeah. So it's not just residential, it's commercial, it's not just solar, it's biomass, it's wind, it's everything. And so SDG&E used to have 607 megawatts available for this cap, but they increased it because they're always reevaluating it. So it's currently at 617 megawatts. And they're very close to reaching that, and it's expected that they'll reach it July. Their entire megawatt capacity, wherever they would be, but I'm assuming it's all San Diego.
And so that's at 5, once it hits 5%.
Yes.
Am I understanding this?
Once SDG&E's renewable portfolio hits 5% of their entire megawatt capacity, which would be 617 megawatts, is when the net energy metering policy will change. Okay. And we expect that to be, well, SDG themselves expect it to be about July of this year.
And that doesn't include
Michael's nodding.
Doesn't include the big solar or the big wind at all, correct? Because right now they're already at 33% for big solar, big wind. That's utility scale.
According to the They say that they're using over 30% renewables currently.
So that's the wind and solar component from the desert.
So I believe you're talking about just rooftop solar equal
No.
5%.
Michael, I'm not understanding.
Just the net metering, the generation that's in the net metering. So it's not the big wind or the big solar out in the desert.
But it could be at your home.
It could be at your home.
It could be at your business.
Correct. Yes.
I believe it includes all renewables, yes.
Yeah, I mean, basically you've got the wastewater utilities are generating a ton of methane.
But it's about electricity generation.
They make electricity from that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. So what's important here, the takeaway, is that this policy will be changing very shortly. And if for some reason you've interconnected under the current NEM 1 rules, you'll be grandfathered for 20 years. And the same is true for NEM 2. If you connect when the policy, after the policy changes, you'll be grandfathered in to the policy rules for 20 years. The successor tariff is what we call NEM 2.0. And the next slide shows what are the major changes for residential consumers to the net energy metering policy. For example, there's going to be a new interconnection fee, which we expect to be about $132. That'll be one time up front. You'll be assessed non-bypassable charges, which are something you're actually charged for now as a regular electric consumer, but a lot of people don't recognize this. If you look at your bills, they finally started itemizing these on your bills. For example, nuclear decommissioning, water board bailout, things like that. And then the last big thing would be a rate change, which is mandatory time of use, which will happen about 2019 is when they expect to implement it. Not to be too worried about this just yet, because in 2018 they should put out some sort of prototype. They're already doing studies and they have volunteers on this program in order to gain more information. So the CPUC, who oversees the utilities, is going to enforce some sort of public notification before this rate change takes effect, and then you'll have some options. So, time of use rate is the next slide. As a solar producer, you won't be required to select the TOU rate until the TOU rate has actually been determined, what it will be for all residential consumers. So they don't know what this rate is yet. They're still studying it. They have people on volunteer programs, as I said, in order to gain analysis of this program. And the CPUC will have ultimate authority over prices, time of use. So what this is going to do, there's a time of use rate already in process. Commercial consumers are already use rates, meaning there's a peak time of rate that they charge you for electricity, semi-peak, off-peaks. So for consumers, this hasn't been determined. Right now, for commercial users, it's generally in the middle of the day, which makes sense because that's when a lot of our businesses are running. However, for residential consumers, it's expected that time of use rate will move to the right, more toward the evening hours when you're home, cooking, turning on your lights, watching television, doing your laundry. These have all are still to be determined, but we'll be hearing more about those in the future. You can participate in NEM 2.0 prior to the TOU rates being determined. You'll still be on the tiered rates that SDG&E currently has. And you'll be grandfathered into those rates for 5 years. So it's kind of like they don't want you to be penalized for being a solar consumer, knowing you're going to TOU without knowing what those rates are going to be. Once TOU is determined, all NEM 2 solar people will be on TOU. And as I said, it should be implemented about 2019. Yes. Okay, so he wants me to finish this slide. Changing the tiers. So SDG&E used to have 4 tiers. They've gone down to 3, they're going to 2, and then afterwards they'll institute a super user surcharge, which hopefully won't be you. So, for example, the current rate structure, the first tier is 100% of the baseline, second tier is 101 to 130% of the baseline, and third tier would be 130% or more of the baseline, and that's how they factor in your charges. So, for example, summer rates 18, 21, 40 approximately. By reducing the tiers and perhaps increasing those rates, they're trying to equalize, the utility is trying to equalize it for all consumers. As a consumer, this would be something you want to consider, perhaps by going solar. Yes?
Do you have any information on the appeal that the IOUs submitted?
Yeah, I actually have a slide somewhere coming up that will help you get more information about all of this. The TOU, it's still all in consideration. They've submitted a plan, they've submitted backup. It's being considered by the CPUC, they're analyzing it. They'll request more information, there will be hearings, et cetera, et cetera. So it's gonna be a long process.
Keri, over here.
You have more? Okay. Okay, I have a question about, maybe we can do that later. I have a question about the tiers and what does the added tier mean? Should I rush to get it before 2017 or should I wait?
This blue tier?
Yeah, what
I
is the
hope you would
tier?
never be on that because that would mean you're like 400% over the baseline, which hopefully you wouldn't be. This is super users, so somebody who's massive mansion, commercials, something's going on that they have such a huge energy load. I don't think you as a residential consumer would have to worry too much, particularly because you're here, so you're energy aware.
The impending event that she did speak about is on number 9 there, that interconnection. If you do it before we hit 5%, which now is going to be, you said, around July.
Is what SDG&E
Of this year.
hypothesizes of this year.
You're going to get the current net metering rate, which is going to be better than the one
Current net metering policy.
which is better than the one that's going to be implemented later.
Slightly.
So
However,
it's better to do it in the next soon.
But I want to caution you. I don't want you to rush into this blindly because I want you to do your research, look at your contractors, figure out your financing. It's not as dire. The NEM 2 is not as dire as we thought it was going to be. The solar industry is pretty happy, more or less, with what came out. We think it's rather fair. And additionally, the ITC, which is a tax credit, has been extended by Congress, and that's a slide we'll talk about in a little bit. So.
Is the date that determines whether you're grandfathered in the actual date that your system goes online, or?
Right.
So yeah, even if you signed up right now, you might not even get it installed before July.
Well,
so.
CPUC had thought about having kind of a waiting list for people who are in the queue who haven't been interconnected yet. But because SDG&E is so close to the cap, it's kind of been decided that's not going to happen for SDG&E at least. But what they require is that you have all of your permitting done and that the jurisdiction has approved you, and then they'll consider you a NEM 1 customer.
So there's like a wait list system that you could potentially get in if you want to avoid.
One has not been instituted.
Oh, okay.
You just have to have your application in with SDG&E.
I see. Okay.
Okay, moving to the next set. So we're up here.
So historical rates. I put this up because a lot of people ask me, well, what were rates previous to this? Why are they going up? You can just check it out per year and per schedule. So a lot of you are probably on DR, domestic service. And once you click on that, it'll just show you all the historical rates for that particular year. The next slide is the California Public Utilities Commission, which are the people who are in charge of all utilities, not just electric utilities. And this link talks about the NEM 2.0 successor tariff. The next link talks about rate changes. This is where you're getting a lot of interaction between the utilities and the CPUC, what the utilities request and what the CPUC allows or disallows. And as a consumer, I think it's really important to know who to go to if you have a question or concern about policy, like NEM policy or rates or anything else. So that's how you contact the PUC. System sizing, because we know it's not based on the square footage of your roof or things like that. When you took your annual consumption from either your bills or your online account, remember how we said it was important to get a 12-month annual usage? So we're looking at your 12 months of kilowatt-hour consumption. And in order to get an idea of system sizing before your contractor comes out and does an actual evaluation, which will be more detailed and more accurate, just to get a general idea, we suggest in San Diego you divide that 12-month kilowatt-hour consumption by 1,700 kilowatt-hours, because that's the average annual production of 1 kilowatt-hour here in San Diego. So for example, if you had a 1 kilowatt system on your roof, we would expect you to produce about 1,700 kilowatt-hours for you a year. And then that result would end up in approximately the number of kilowatts that would offset your electric use for that prior year's consumption, but that would offset 100% of your prior year's consumption, which is not necessarily what you want to do. Some people undersize their system, 85% and up. Some people oversize their system because they're considering adding whole house AC, electric vehicles, additional humans in the house, whatever it may be. So in the next slide, we give a more specific example. If you only consumed 7,000 kilowatt hours in the previous year, divide by 1,700 kilowatt hours, you would get an approximate system size of 4.1. Remember, offsetting 100% of that previous use. Once you have some more information, here are some resources to help you better size a system. SDG&E's solar PV calculator, since you've already gone on there and pulled off your consumption and looked at a couple other things, this will show you, here it is, different size systems and what percentage of your past electric consumption they'd offset. The next slide is ours. It's our electric rate analyzer. What you do in this blue and white column is actually type in your previous kilowatt hour usage, and I just made up some numbers here. This is an interactive site where once you type in that information and you click on whether you have electric heat and what zone you live in, coastal, inland, etc., you take this dial and you actually move it to the left or right to get a kilowatt system size, and then that will in turn change this graph over here on the right in terms of dollars or kilowatt hours. So I put it in dollars so I could see where my tiers were with a system size of this based on my previous consumption. As a note, tiers 3 and 4, as we talked about, have been condensed into one tier, but the prices are the same, so it won't give you a different rating. 2 paths to solar PV. You can either do an outright purchase or a third-party ownership where you would lease or do a power purchase agreement of the system. For purchasing, you could purchase it outright, get a home equity loan or energy efficient solar loan. Oh, sorry, that link somehow changed places. One other option is a property assessed clean energy loan. The link is there for the PACE loan. That's a really interesting loan in that, unlike traditional, it's not based on your credit history. It's going to be based on the property's valuation. And the loan actually stays with the property. So if you were to sell it, the loan would be assumed by the new buyer. So it doesn't affect your credit. And this, Energy Upgrade California, another great website, they're going to help you sift through all this financing information. So for example, I went onto the website and they asked me a few simple questions, maybe like 10. Would you prefer A or B or C or D or both if you don't want to make a choice? So I said things that were important to me was to be able to use the contractor of my choice, have a physical branch location for my lender where I could go in and talk to somebody in person. I wanted to pay off the loan without receiving a penalty. I wanted to sell the property before I was completely paying off the financing, and I wanted tax-deductible interest. This was just what I thought was important. And it kind of ranked my results. And then in turn, it gave me a product ranking. So these are products that are available in the financial world. And it ranked them 1, 2, 3, etc. If you click next on that slide, it should bring up the titles. Oh, okay. So it ranked them. It gave me a percentage match to my questions. It told me the finance product name, the duration of the loan, what was available, and how many months. But when you click on the product name, it will actually take you to a more detailed web page where you can look at information and then ultimately contact a provider of that product.
Those are all different financing options?
There were more. I cut them off just for my questions that I answered. This is an outstanding website.
Okay.
So people are like, well, okay, I want to buy a system. How much does it cost? Using the CSI statistics, we figure it's about $3 to $5 per watt. Remember that cost per watt, which is what you're using to rank your or compare your contractors. And the historical cost per watt has dropped dramatically. When we started the program, it was 9.59 per watt. And at the end of third quarter 2015, it was 3.99 per watt, which is why I said it wasn't so important to have the incentives available to you anymore, because what happened with the incentive program was the market was saturated and it brought down the overall cost. Things that could mean, if your contractor says your price is above this ideal, it could be because you need your roof replaced, you need a panel upgrade, you've got trees in the way, you're going to do a ground mount because you have a lovely vineyard and you need to do trenching. Things like that would be acceptable to be above the dollar per watt average. If you're going to purchase your system, as long as you have a liability to the federal government, as long as you owe them something, you're eligible for the investment tax credit, which currently is 30% of eligible system costs through 2019. So December 31st, 2019, you can still receive, as long as your system is installed before then, you can still receive 30% on your federal tax credit. They won't pay you with a check, they'll just reduce what you owe. The good news about this is that 30% was going to end this year, but Congress extended it. So we're very happy. But after 2019, there will be a 2-year phase out. It will go to 26% through December 31st, 2020, 22% through December 31st, 2021. After that, for residential consumers, it's expected, it will go to 0 unless Congress amends it. For commercial consumers, the percentage will remain at 10% to increase the economy. It's a one-time credit, but you can carry over any leftovers. And for residential consumers, you use Form 5695. There's nothing you need per se from your contractor. It's something you file with your federal taxes. And the form and instructions are on the IRS website. If you have a liability. If for some reason you don't have a liability or you don't have a large income, for example, a retired pensioner, you might not have a liability and therefore, even though you'd be eligible, you may not be able to claim this. So it's really important to talk to your tax professional. Yes. And this is an example of a purchase system with a federal tax credit. So if you consumed about 5,100, you divide that by the magic number of 1,700, you'd end up with a 3 kilowatt system that you want to buy at $5 a watt, high, a little bit high in the end. The cost would be $1,500, but you'd subtract 15,000, sorry. You'd subtract 30% with the ITC, which would grant you $4,500, and your total system cost would be $10,500. So the website where...
Could a non-taxable entity like the City of San Diego or the University of California, the CSD, lease roof space
Right.
and have that be a taxable entity?
You'd have to talk to your tax advisor. There are ways to get around this, I'm sure, but I cannot advise you on that.
I'm not asking for advice, just asking for what you've heard, what you might have heard is going on. Because it would be a great way to,
There are, for example, we'll get to it a little bit later when we're talking about third-party options, but if you don't have liability, you can lease your system or do a PPA, and what would happen there usually is that the provider would give you a discount on the overall price because they know they're assuming that 30% for you.
oh, okay. Thanks so much.
So this is finding financing. We're back to the EUC website again, where before I had, here on the first slide, I have the list of the product rankings. This will actually, when I click on, for example, the PACE loan on the left or a secured loan on the right, it will actually break it down by provider. So I can see who is offering this product that I'm wanting and what are their details, and then I can click on it for further information. So if for some reason I don't want to buy the system, or perhaps I don't have a tax liability, I might want to consider a third-party ownership option. There are two options within this, the lease and the power purchase agreement. The lease, you might have $0 up front, and it would be a fixed dollars per month paid. You still might have an SDG&E bill. That's important to remember. The power purchase agreement, you're actually purchasing the production of the system. So if your system is oversized and you're overproducing in kilowatt hours, that's not a good scenario for this particular one because you'll be paying for that. So it's really important if you're going to do a PPA to get your system sized correctly, but the providers and contractors are very well aware of this. The next slide is just the pros and cons of owning our third parties. I would say the largest one is the ITC, the 30%, whether you can make use of it or not. Batteries, a lot of people say, well, what's the position on batteries here with solar? We think it's a really good deal. It is, except for residential consumers, it's not there just yet. It's a nascent market. For commercial owners, it's a good thing because batteries allow them to shave off their peak demand at the highest price points. For residential consumers, unfortunately, there's not an incentive because the current incentive available would be for not just backup power, for example, when the grid goes down, but you have to discharge your batteries, things like that. And unfortunately, the price points are a little bit high right now. For example, a 5 kilowatt battery, we've done studies and surveys, it's about $20,000 currently. We expect it to go down because it's a new technology, kind of like computers, cell phones, solar at one point. So check back with us, in a year or so. We'll see where we're at then. So the example of the batteries there are mostly commercial because of this reason. What does solar really look like for me? This is a case study I did in Chula Vista. These are actual homeowners, and on the right you'll see photos of their actual bills. This home was built in 1998, approximately 2,500 square foot. They installed in January 2013. The total cost then was $25,360. At that point, we still had the CSI incentive available, which they qualified for. And with their federal tax credit, their total price came down to $17,284 for a 5.76 kilowatt system. What does that mean in the real world? The next slide shows their bills. The month that they installed, their total bill was $424.19. 309 of that was electric. About a year and a half later, sorry, they didn't have consecutive bills for me. Their electric consumption bill was $0, and they only had to pay $26.77 for gas therms. And I know you're saying January and August, there's a big difference in months. Let's get something more comparable. So just to prove that it was equitable, previously in September of 2011, they had approximately, again, $300 worth of electricity and $20, $30 worth of therms. So they saved at least $300 per month by installing solar. That's one of my favorite slides. Okay, so that was pretty much a quick look at electric PV. Any overarching questions that we need to address right now?
So I'm just curious about the batteries, if you know any figures on when the price is projected to become really practical for residential, because I know everyone's pretty interested in the Tesla batteries, and I get a dozen questions a day on, well, you know, what's the point if I'm still, in a way, relying on SDG&E? And
right, and
like,
for those off-grid people?
Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
Well, I don't, because I don't work in SCHIP, but I have an excellent team of colleagues that do, and I brought their contact information. I have their cards. I have some handouts. A lot of the information is online as well. Some people like that hard copy, though, so we brought it, although we try to be sustainable. So please recycle or give to your friends if you don't need it any longer. But yeah,
There's
they can
handout
help
material
you.
from both of our speakers, okay?
They can help you with that. You know, like anything, computers, iPhones, you know, the price will go down. It'll be efficient at some point. Okay, so we're gonna break into solar water heating pretty quickly. I'm not an expert on this. My teammates are, and I have their contact information handouts too. Yes.
So second, Dan.
We had looked at an industrial scenario, and batteries really made great sense to handle the peaks when you're turning on
Most
various
definitely.
things and turning them off. To basically handle a big load, they didn't look particularly efficient. So a small battery might be a way to ease into this without a huge investment.
Could be. I'm a little bit worried about the price point. There would be no incentives just for backup. You'd have to discharge. There are a number of factors that go into it. There are a number of different types of batteries, which I didn't bring you a list of, but our SGIP people can help you with that. But some people have done it, and some people have done it at the full price point, $20,000 or more. It just depends on what are your issues. Are you looking at being off grid? Are you looking at removing yourself from the utility? Are you looking at price points?
Most people do not go off grid. 99.9% of the people that hate solar are on grid. So it's pretty rare that you'd ever find somebody that, there's a few people that are just the geeks out there that says, I want to get rid of my
Or
SDG.
our friendly guests.
Yes, that say, I want to go completely off grid. You need batteries, you need a lot of tech, you need to monitor that all the time. There's a few people that are out in the country that do that, but it's pretty rare.
But it's becoming more popular, actually. And there are resources and people that you can connect with.
It's for the unusual circumstance. If you have a visitor with 5 daughters who all have long hair and they're doing dryers in the middle of the day, I mean, those are the sorts of things where a small battery would handle your peak load for a few minutes, but you don't have to build a $50,000 battery system.
Most definitely.
We'll need to go fast
Yeah.
through this water heater part.
Yeah.
Can the battery operate as a closed loop? And second question, slide note, is the cost or value that you're adding to your home, are there any studies beyond the Berkeley study, which was done in 2013, that talks about how much it actually adds to your home?
The PV?
Yeah, like if you bought it as an asset.
Yeah, there are tons of studies, actually. And we're actually going to be doing a presentation with real estate agents because they have the same question. Last week, I literally sat down with a real estate agent, and she told me that she chooses homes with solar, whether she's representing a seller or buyer, because of the demand. And she said a lot of people aren't even concerned with the ITC. They just want solar to reduce their bill. Regarding the batteries, I don't want to speak to that, but I'll give you the contact information of somebody you can talk to. Okay. Solar water heating. So basically it captures the sun's heat to preheat your water in your existing system. Every one of them is going to have a storage component. They work with any system, gas, electric, propane, and you don't have to necessarily replace your heater. and can work with tankless. The advantage of solar water heating is it's a smaller size system to put on your roof, and it's cheaper upfront cost. You can save, it's estimated, up to 75% of your hot water heating costs by installing solar thermal. There are two types of systems, passive and active. Active actually uses a pump filtering heat exchange fluid. And these next two slides had a video, but apparently that didn't get translated, so we'll just skip over it.
I'm sorry, yeah.
It just showed how the water came into your home and got heated, etc. There are incentives available for natural gas solar water heaters, and you can look at our website for more information. It doesn't cover pools, heating, cooling, and floors, unfortunately. Right now, that the incentives are at the highest level they've ever been, the $29.85 per therm. And the next slide shows you if you saved 115 therms, your rebate would be approximately $3,400. It is available for the ITC with solar heating. And the next slide with the dollars show you what it actually be, whether you have gas and you're available, the incentives are available to you, or whether you have electric and they're not. Quickly, we also do rebates for electric vehicles. There are many more than those pictured, and the dollar amounts vary anywhere from $1,500 to $5,000. We also incentivize electric motorcycles, and the requirements are at the bottom. The links are there. And the next page shows you the rebates depending on the type of vehicle you have. Lastly, I wanted to concentrate on local things that are happening in SDG&E territory with the basics, and Michael's going to bring it further nationwide. But I just wanted to mention this. A climate action plan for San Diego has 5 pillars, and one of them includes clean and renewable energy. And the goal is to achieve 100% renewable energy citywide by 2035, which is what Peter brought up in the beginning. The next slide lists some PV positions that we've taken as a city. And the next few graphs are just to show you an idea of what CSI has accomplished. I think that's going to help us reach the Climate Action Plan goals. We've already set a good foundation. We got to keep it going. The next slide shows San Diego resident consumes approximately 6 kilowatt hours per day. Multiply that by the number of members in your family and your household, etc. The next slide is by the lovely Equinox Project, which works really hard on getting a dashboard out. They just released their most recent dashboard. And this is a slide from their presentation, Growth in SDG&E Territory. Next slide is from SIA, another great organization which shows the actual solar installations per year in California as a whole. And the last slide shows solar installations in the US as a whole. So you can see a great trend here across all resources and all territories. And if you need more contact information, there's our phone number. The 3 emails are for PV, solar water heating, and electric vehicles. I've got SGIP information, whatever you need to know. We're here to help you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Keri. And San Diego is #1 or #2 in solar uptake in the country, depending on how you measure it. #1, I think, in electric vehicle uptake in the country. I'm one of those, so I did get that $2,500 rebate for the all-battery electric vehicle through CSE. So this organization works, and I really want to thank you for being here. That was great. Okay, next. So Michael Powers, we're going to go right into this. It's not as long. That was the longest slide deck we've ever received. You got through it great. Thank you very much. You just were fed with a hose of information. We will have this available on our website. Is that okay? We have it available? Okay, great. All right, so we'll have this available on our website in a couple of days. Michael is our wizard on doing that, both on video and on the website, so it will be there if you want to get back and review it. Michael Powers, again, is one of the founders of Stellar Solar, one of the leading solar companies here in San Diego, and I'm proud to have him as a board member for the Genie Institute. Michael Powers.
I have to tread water for a little bit just so we can get the slide deck set up because it's a little different. I just want to say the one thing that's really nice about the Center for Sustainable Energy is that a lot of other communities don't have that resource available. They really are kind of they don't have to answer really to anybody. And so they don't work for the utilities, and they don't work for the solar industry, and they don't work for any one community. And so they're really the perfect neutral third-party entity to be in the position that they're in. They gather a lot of information, and they make the information freely available to anybody who wants to see it. And I'll just add this, that the organization that represents my industry, the solar industry, is we saw a slide there at the end, SIA, Solar Industries Association. There's a California version, CalSIA. And so all of the bigger solar installers and solar manufacturers belong to that organization. And when we were getting ready to set up a local chapter here in San Diego, the ideal place for all of our competitors to get together, that we could get under one roof and meet about our industry. I know that sounds like a great idea, but it's really hard for a whole lot of companies that are competing with each other all the time to get together. And so the perfect umbrella really was the Center for Sustainable Energy, and they helped organize a local chapter of CalSIA. And what we do is really try to do consumer protection to make sure that there's nobody out there doing solar installations. As Peter said, there's literally hundreds of companies that can do it. There's only really a fairly small group that belong to the CalSIA chapter, which is our industry organization. And so that's another question that you can ask when you're shopping around, is whether or not they're members of CalSIA, which is the Industry Trade Association, because we do try to police ourselves. So the other thing I wanted to add is a lot of great information, and this is certainly not meant to be critical, but I will tell you that in 1998, I was working for a subsidiary of Home Depot, and I was interested in solar energy, and so I went to a presentation, a little bit like the one that we just saw, and I came home, and my wife said, "So we're going to go solar?" I said, "We can't. I'm just too stupid. There's too much to know, and I can't figure it out, and I think we just have to put that on the back burner for a while because it's just too hard." And I was in the marketing department of Home Depot, and so my job was to try to explain to people why they should do certain home improvement projects, and I couldn't figure out a good way to explain it myself. But I couldn't give up because I really believed in the Global Energy Network Institute, because I'd been involved with Genie for a long time, and I said, I think this is really the gateway into helping people become part of the renewable energy effort, is to be able to use their rooftop to immediately have an impact. So we need to figure this out. And I kept kind of cranking away at the numbers until I could figure out a way to talk about this that for me was a little simpler and made a little more sense. The challenge is when you get into all the details, it can be a little overwhelming. And the thing of it is that the big picture is really compelling. And so the first part I would suggest is to understand that piece first. And then as you have questions, you can always drill down and get a little more information. So don't think you have to know all that stuff first in order to go solar. And so, what Peter asked me to talk about is why my rooftop would be an asset, why you might think about that. How many people here actually do have solar? I know that Peter does. Anybody else have solar on your roof already? Okay. So this is kind of new information. A little bit about my company. We are a full service contractor. That's our license number. You can look us up on the website that she was talking about. We are one of the companies that's locally based, and we're owned locally. So there are some national companies. We're not one of those. We're here. We were founded in 1998. We are a member of the Better Business Bureau. We have an A+ rating, and those are important. And I can also say that when they have the contest every year with the Union Tribune of people picking their best companies, we've actually been voted the best solar company for the last 4 out of 5 years, which is kind of nice to be able to say as well. Thanks. Some of the local buildings that we've done, we do both commercial and residential, and I like to show this because these are real projects, and unless you flew over in an airplane, you wouldn't necessarily know. Every single Costco store in San Diego has solar on the roof. A lot of the Walmart stores do. This is a San Diego Cardiac Center, which is right around 163 and 805. That's completely covered in solar. We did the Salk Institute, which is about a half a megawatt. It's 540 kilowatts. So you can see all 4 of these buildings have solar on their roof. And actually, the Salk Institute uses so much electricity that those 4 roofs together is about 15% of their total load. But it really was important for them to do what they could do to be renewable. And it was also important that you couldn't see any of it from the ground, because architecturally that building is so pristine and it's won so many awards, and nothing could change the appearance of it. The other piece I like to tell about this is that this building is actually 3 stories above ground and 2 stories below ground. And you know, the solar is all up on the roof, and the electric switchgear is all in the basement. And the only way to get the wires from the top to the bottom is to go through 4 floors of solid concrete. That building was one of the early completely cast concrete buildings that was made in the 1960s. And so you have to drill holes all the way through, and you have to do it between midnight and 5 a.m. because they're doing research the rest of the time, and the drilling makes a lot of really horrible noises. So that was an interesting project. We did get it done. It was pretty successful, and I actually took this picture going over in a biplane myself, so I'm very proud of that. We also this is the First Unitarian Church in Hillcrest. That was an interesting design because it's a standing metal seam roof, and there is a special component that will go on standing metal seam roof so you don't have to penetrate it, so it actually made it pretty easy to do the installation in that respect. We kind of already talked about how does it work. You know, net metering is really what makes it work. And just on a couple pieces, just to make sure that it's clear, because I think it's really important, you know, yeah, that's the same diagram that we looked at earlier. The sun, you know, the light hits the solar panels, the light turns into electricity, the electricity is converted into a form that the house can use, and you use as much as you can, and whatever you don't use goes backwards. That last piece is the most important piece, because the thing about solar energy, or any real renewable energy, wind, all renewables, they're intermittent. And what that means is they come and go, and we can't turn them up and down. Nature turns them up and down. So in the middle of the day, most houses have way more power than they can use. And so that extra power automatically, if you're not using it, it goes back through the meter for credit, and the utility resells it to somebody else who can use it. And then at nighttime when you come home and pull the power back out, the meter goes the opposite direction. Well, they don't really go the opposite direction anymore because we don't have those kind of meters anymore, but it was really satisfying for a while there to turn the solar on and see that wheel stop and then go the other way, because it literally did. So it's equivalent to making deposits during the daytime and then making withdrawals at night. You don't store the electricity, you store the money. And that's really how the credit works. On a daily basis, generally you make more power in the day and use more power in the evening. In the summertime, the days are twice as long, so you make twice as much power in the summer and not as much in the winter. But as was already explained when Keri said, you get a whole year to average out the debits and credits. So at the end of the year, if you've produced as much as you've used, in general, your electricity bill goes closer and closer to zero. We used to be able to say it goes all the way to zero. We can't say that anymore because there are these new charges that you can't get away from no matter what you do. But here's the thing. Does that net metering, does that make sense to everybody? Over the course of a year, if you produce as much as you use, your bill goes close to zero. Some months you're going to produce more than you use, some months you're going to use more than you produce, but the goal is to average it out over the course of the year so you can store the money instead of storing the electricity. That's why the grid becomes so important. That's why going off grid gets to be more challenging, because people are used to being able to turn on as much power as they want to and use it up. My great example is, let's say you have a big party on Friday night, use up a whole lot of electricity. Well, you've got a bill sitting there. Well, then you go on vacation for 2 weeks, and for 2 weeks you're not using any power, but the solar is still producing. By the time you come home from vacation, it's as if you never had the party. It averages out. So that's the basic principle that makes it work. Just to give you an example, if you have a $200 a month electric bill times 12 months, that's $2,400, right? It's not hard. Times 10 years, that's $24,000. It's pretty simple math. If you put in a little bit of an inflation, like let's say the cost of electricity is going to go up at 6% a year for the next 10 years, you're really looking at $31,000. That's the cost of doing nothing. That's the cost of continuing to just give all your money to the power company, and the question is, what's the return on that investment? So that's the big picture I think that people kind of lose track of when you're getting into the nickels and dimes and 2 cents versus 7 cents versus 5 cents. If you do nothing more at all than just keep paying your bill, it's a bunch of money. And it's a bunch of money you never see again. And I can tell you that when I was first talking to the managers of the Home Depot stores, they had the opportunity to either take the program or not take the program. It was up to them. And in order to take it, they had to give up this big end cap, which was full of ever-ready batteries, and they knew how many millions of dollars they were going to sell in ever-ready batteries, so it was kind of a big deal. And I had the first 2 stores say, no, I'm not interested in doing this. Nobody buys $25,000 products from Home Depot, because the average cost is about $25,000. And then the third guy, he said, well, let me ask you this. What's the return on my investment? And I said, how much are you spending now? He said, $200 a month. I said, how long have you been living in your house? Oh, about 10 years. So you already spent 24 grand. What was the return on that investment? So it's really the difference between like paying rent and making a house payment. In one case, you just have an expense. In the other case, you're actually building value in your home, and you'll get that back when you sell your house. Plus, you're saving the planet. Plus, you're paying less for electricity. So that's really what the value equation is about. And we can't get lost in the details, because I think that's to the utilities' advantage to make it so confusing that people just say, you know what, it's too hard, I'm not doing it. I'll just pay the monthly bill. So, that's kind of the big picture. A 5 kilowatt system that produces about 700 kilowatt hours a month, which is kind of average, costs about $20,000. Let's just keep it simple and say you're going to spend it, you're going to buy cash, you're not financing it. The tax credit is a little over $6,000. That means the net cost is $14,000. That's about what you're going to spend with SDG&E in the next 5.5 years if you do nothing at all. So how long does it take you to get your money back? Well, the day that you turn it on, you get your money back because your house is worth $20,000 more than it was. Or you'll save enough over the next 5.5 years to recoup your investment. And here's the other way to look at this increased value. If somebody was paying $200 a month for their electric bill, and now they're not, because they're buying a house that's got solar on it, they have $200 a month to spend on a house payment that they didn't have before. So they can afford to spend more for your house. And that's how you get more money when you sell your house with solar on it, because people will pay more for it because they have more income to be able to spend on the house. Does that make sense?
Quick question. And I know that this gentleman had asked something related to if there were any known trends on what percentage, for example, if your system costs $20,000, well, can you charge, or I mean, can you list your home for $20,000 more? And I know that most home improvements, you never see 100% return on investment when you resell. Like, for example, kitchens, it's usually like 60 to 80% of what you spent roughly. So I just wanted to know if there was a percentage that you're aware of when you go to resell. Or do you know, are there any trends like, can you charge 80%? Can you list your home for 80% of the $20K more, or do you not know?
The simple answer is there's no simple answer.
Yeah.
However,
It varies,
the guidelines are this. The older the system is, because we all know that over time they start producing less electricity, and people have a sense of, if it's 10 years old, my system is 14 years old, so it doesn't have the same value in potential electricity that a brand new one would have, and it doesn't have the same warranty coverage.
So age, it definitely has
Makes a big
factor.
difference.
Okay.
But the thing is, with electricity, it's like a printing press that prints money. It's provable how much electricity it's producing, and that is actually provable by the last year's power bill. So there's a device on your house, and what I would say is that there is no other device that's like it. It's not like a kitchen, it's not like a pool, it's not like any other home improvement. Yeah. It's a device that produces a cash, it produces a commodity that has cash value. Okay. And so how familiar the buyer will be with that, it used to be a pretty odd item, but now it's much more common. So now we're really having to educate the investment community, and the people that are actually doing, and that's one of the things that Center for Sustainable Energy is doing right now is trying to bring the real estate market up to speed so that when they do their estimates, that's counted in a realistic fashion.
Well, and I also think that there's the appeal for people that want to live a more green, environmentally friendly lifestyle. So there's sort of an appeal maybe to pay a little bit more for that as well, besides just the money saving.
I think that the numbers that we were just looking at, is when it really comes down to dollars and cents. If you have an appliance that will produce cash at a predictable rate for the next 5 years, you can point to that and say, what is that worth to you? And that's how it comes. In my business, I would say that probably 10 to 20% of our customers are doing what they're going into solar just for environmental reasons. Most people really just want to save money and not have the power company tell them what to do, which, we're still going to be connected to the grid, I think, for a while, but at least we've got leverage now.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, you bet.
Michael, are those tax credits available only for owner-occupied, or is it available for rental properties as well?
That's a good question. The rules are a little different. The tax credit, the residential tax credit is primarily for your main residence. So if you have a second house, you can't get a residential tax credit on that. However, commercial properties, meaning income-producing properties, can make an investment in renewable energy and also get a tax credit. So the extent to which you do that, the rules are a little different about income producing because your taxes are different when you're putting solar on an income-producing property. Does that make sense? The good news is that normally, let's say some of those buildings that I just showed you, like the medical center, not only were they able to take a 30% income tax credit on the business's income, but they're also able to depreciate it because it's considered a capital investment. And it's like any other piece of equipment, it wears out over time. And so you can show the value of that on the books going down by 20% a year. And so it's almost like getting another 30% tax credit through the depreciation. This is why the companies that offer leases do such a good business, because they're buying those solar panels basically for 40 cents on the dollar, because they get a 30% tax credit and then they get to depreciate them, which is like another 30%. So they're lending you the money on a system that they've already marked down almost 60%. And this is why I don't suggest to people that they do those kind of financing. There's a lot of opportunities out there, and if whatever works best for you, but just keep in mind that when you buy the solar panels, you're paying for the solar panels. When you buy the solar panels and then finance them, you're paying for the money too. And there's lots of ways to borrow money besides those programs. Just because it's a solar loan doesn't mean it's more green. It just means that they're willing to offer the money for solar, and some people aren't. So that's another whole subject. I think we're gonna run the video next if we can do that, Peter.
Ready?
Yeah, let me just cue it up for a second. Just recouping this, the good thing about solar is that compared to a lot of other appliances and products that have a relatively short lifetime, the solar panels themselves should last for well over 30 years unless they're physically damaged of some way. The inverters, no matter whether it's micro or a central string inverter, the more hours it operates, the more likely it will be to fail. Most of them last about 10 years or so. The basic warranty is 10 years, but you can upgrade to 20 on a lot of them, and the microinverters have a 25-year warranty. So the basic panels and the inverter is a system that really should last for as long as the home is going to be there. And if it's not working, if it breaks, then we come out and fix it, and then it's put back into operation again. Almost never does it work kind of halfway or like 30%. It's either 100% working or it's 100% not working, and then it gets fixed. We had a guy that was, I think Peter was here not too long ago. Peter Norby is a guy who has really demonstrated not being off-grid, but being zero net energy. And what zero net energy means is that he's able to produce as much power as he consumes, so his net overall effect on the planet is zero. And he wants to see us not just using solar to power our houses, but solar to power our cars, which is really even much more exciting. As quick as it is to pay back the cost of electricity for your house, if you can replace the cost of gasoline with electric car fuel, you get your money back even more quickly. Just to tell a quick story, I drove an electric car for 3 years. My electric bill had been zero, and then the year we got the electric car, it came around, and our electric bill was $700 for a whole year. And my wife was furious. She said, "What the hell happened here? You need to fix this." And I said, "Well, wait a minute, honey." I said, "I didn't pay $2,400 in gasoline last year because I was plugging in the electric car. So I save so much money on gasoline. And she said, yeah, but you buy the gasoline and I buy the electricity, so I'm still out $700. It's a true story. Yeah. I said, if I pay the electric bill, would you zip it? She said, yeah. So I paid the electric bill. The $700 electric bill was much better than the $2,400 gasoline bill. And that's how it worked. And no oil changes. No. And plus you get to say that you're running your car on solar power, which is very cool. So one of our guys who's one of our best advocates, this is literally his house, his window, and he allowed us to do this little 30-second commercial video.
Energy pioneer and Stellar solar customer. Stellar helped me and my wife Julie. Hi, I'm Peter Norby, energy pioneer and Stellar solar customer. Stellar helped me and my wife Julie to power our entire life by the sun. We installed our solar system in 2007 to power our home 100% by sunshine. In 2009, we began driving electric vehicles, so we expanded our system. These moves eliminated our annual electric and auto fuel bills. Now is the time for every homeowner to look at solar with the extension of the 30% federal tax credit and net metering plus 2.49% financing. Stellar is calling this a solar trifecta. Check it out at stellarsolar.net. That's stellarsolar.net.
Did you get all that?
Hi, I'm Peter Norby, energy pioneer and Stellar solar customer.
Literally, the way we found Peter is we put solar on his house, and then 3 or 4 years later, he called us back and wanted more panels, and nobody had ever done that before. And we said, why do you need more panels? And he said, because I got this electric car. He was driving a Cooper Mini that was 100% electric before anybody else was. It was a test, kind of a test pilot thing that he was doing. And now he's a spokesman for BMW. He's got 2 BMW electric cars. But he really gets into the air pollution, all the problems that are still being caused by transportation issues, not just powering the home, but how do we get solar power to get rid of all this pollution in vehicles as well. And he still believes that's going to be a really important piece. So this is the part I really like to talk about, and thank you for staying and being attentive, and I'll go through it pretty quickly. But, besides being one of the owners of Stellar Solar, I've also been a Genie board member for quite a long time, and I moved to San Diego to work with Peter and his group. And so I find this part very exciting. Here's one very, very important fact that we sometimes lose sight of. The Earth receives enough solar energy in 1 hour to power the planet for 1 year. And maybe you've heard that before. And I actually looked this up to make sure that that was true. And you know what it is? We can say, well, maybe it's 10 and a half months, or maybe it's an hour and a half, but really it's pretty close to this. The Earth receives enough solar energy in 1 hour to power the planet for a year. And so if we ask ourselves, well, how much is that? It means our solar supply exceeds what we use by a factor of 10,000. We get 10,000 times more power than we use over the course of a year. And what does that look like? Well, if you look carefully, there's 1 or 2 pennies right here, and this is what 10,000 pennies looks like. So I really want to have a jar with 10,000 pennies that we could pour out onto the floor and just look at it like we used to do with the World Game to really get a sense of what 10,000 looks like. This is what whoops. Let me go back. This is what we get in solar energy in 1 day, and this is what we use in an entire year. That's what 10,000 to 1 means. And the reason that solar energy is going to be, I think, such an important leveraging item to get us past climate change and to really change the way we use energy is because even if we wind up wasting a whole lot of it in the process of harvesting it, it's still 10,000 to 1. It's still 10,000 times more than we need. Does that make sense? So we could waste half of it and still have way more than we need. The other piece is that every other form of fuel that we have, if you set up an engine, it's going to run on fuel. With solar panels, you harvest the energy, but the energy is free. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But starting from that point, the reason why this is so important, we're going to see, I think, in the next 10 years, what's called the rise of the energy prosumer. A prosumer is an energy consumer who sometimes is consuming and sometimes is producing. And so it's not just for energy, but in other areas of life, this idea of a prosumer is really important. Because like we talked about earlier, if you're harvesting solar energy, sometimes you have too much, and then you need to sell it. And sometimes you don't have enough, and then you need to buy it. What we found over time is that people, as they have solar energy on their roof and they start looking at the value, it changes their behavior. People want to shop around and see how they could get the best possible price when they're selling. You know, high electric prices are only bad when you're buying. When you're selling, high electric prices are good. And we just went through this, we're still going through this huge effort with the Public Utility Commission about how much solar energy is worth. Up until now, it's been worth the same price that you're buying it at. You get to sell it at the same price, so it has the same retail rate. And the utility company is saying, well, you're producing it when we don't need it, so we think it's only worth about half as much. And we say, yes, but ours has 0 carbon associated with it. We think it's worth twice as much, because all of the energy you're producing has lots of carbon, and somebody else is going to have to pay the burden of that, you know, either in healthcare costs, in rising, you know, seashores, whatever. So we really think that it's worth a lot more. Right now, if you're a prosumer in California, you don't really have access to the marketplace yet. You know, it goes through this crazy regulatory process to decide how much you're allowed to get. But what I'd like to do is talk about a few things that are going to, I think, open up this opportunity in the next couple years just through pure market pressure. And you'll see that when we put solar on somebody's roof today, the best we can do is add value to their house and wipe out their electric bill, but that's a minimum, because I think it's going to get a lot better because what they're doing is worth a lot more, and the market doesn't reflect that yet, okay? If battery storage comes about, I don't think it'll cause people to go off grid. I think it'll help them negotiate a little bit better when they sell the power back to the power company, because I'm going to sell it back to you when the price is the highest. And if, you know, I'll produce what I need and I'll store the rest, and then I'll sell it when the price is the highest, and I'll use it when the price is the least. I have a customer right now who likes to do a lot of ceramics, and so she has an electronic kiln in her house, and she runs that now between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. So during the night, when the price is the lowest, she runs her electric kiln. And then during the daytime, she uses almost no power. She's selling all the solar power back to the electric company when the price is really high. She's so smart. And she's doing this manually because that's what she does. But in the future, this will all happen automatically, you know, because it'll all be programmed, because she's figured it out. So one of the things, there's 4 really big trends right now. There's others, but the 4 I wanted to talk about that I think are going to make a big difference in the next several years. The first is the rise of community solar. One of the criticisms that the solar industry gets is that only wealthy people can afford to go solar. You have to have a big house, you have to have big electric bills, you have to have a lot of money in the bank, and if you don't have those things, you can't participate with solar. And to a certain extent, that's true. But it's changing. Community solar is actually a way that a group of people can get together and, like a co-op, buy into one big solar array. And it really hasn't hit California yet. They've tried in other areas of the country. Colorado is pretty big on it right now. Wisconsin is big on it. Different models are being tested. Right now in California, only utilities are offering solar co-op. Or community solar. It doesn't seem like it's going to be as attractive, because if you join a community solar program today in California, your electric bill is going to go up, not down. So there has to be a way that by grouping together their purchasing power, let's say 100 people can each have 1% of the solar array, and they get 1% of the output of the solar array, and it applies directly against their electric bill. And that's the ideal that we're all kind of working on. What I'm seeing in the industry is that 2016 could be the breakout year for community solar. There certainly is financing available. The third-party groups can do the developing and then manage the system in such a way that people can affordably only get 1 or 2% of a total solar array, and that's more than enough to cover their $100 a month electric bill or $50 a month electric bill. So we're going to see community solar. And by the way, on all of these items, I would suggest, if you know how to set up a Google alert, set up a Google alert with those search terms, and you'll get, you know, weekly updates on all the news that's going on in that particular area. By the way, Peter, could we bring up on one of the other slides the Terawatts website when you get a chance? Another item that you're going to see more and more of is something called community choice energy. It used to be called Community Choice Aggregation, or CCA, and that's such a horrible term that we don't use that as much anymore. Community Choice Energy is what we're discussing. And what happens in community choice energy is that a city or community can vote to bargain collectively on behalf of its citizens with the utility. And so 2 years ago, they did this in Marin County. They've also done it in Sonoma County 2 years ago. They did it in Lancaster last year. And just this month, a few weeks ago, San Francisco launched its own CCE program. And what that does is it puts the city in charge of deciding what kind of power is going to be used and where it's going to come from. And so the community buys the power and builds whatever resources are needed for that. And then the utility companies simply deliver that power for a fee. And you would think that that would probably cost more, but at least everywhere it's been tried in California so far, the costs go down and the percent of renewable energy goes up. And we're pretty convinced here in San Diego, a lot of us are, that the only way that San Diego is going to get to 100% renewable energy in the timelines that we hope to do it is by going this method through community choice. And I think you're going to see in the next year or two, a lot of the smaller communities like La Mesa, Encinitas, Del Mar, maybe Carlsbad, banding together into their own community choice program. And all it requires is for the citizens to take the vote. Sometimes, in some cases, it's just the city council can vote to do it. And then everyone in that district automatically is opted in unless you opt out. So you still get your bill from the power company, but the power is being purchased by the community. And if they want to put more money aside to build more solar and make a higher percentage of solar, they can do it. They can reward you more than retail. They can decide to pay you over 100% for your own production, because that supersedes anything that the PUC does, which is why some of us are pretty excited about it, because continuing to go up to Sacramento to have arguments with the power companies, lobbyists, and the people on the PUC gets to be really challenging, especially when you're all the way down here in San Diego. So community choice energy, that's another development that we're going to see. This is very early, but I would say keep an eye on this. If you put a search term in, you want to look for blockchain solar. The very first peer-to-peer solar energy sales took place 2 weeks ago in Brooklyn. There's 5 houses on one side of the street and 5 houses on the other side of the street. The 5 on this side had solar, and they sold their solar energy to the 5 houses on this side, and the utility company really didn't have to do anything because the entire transaction was kept track of through software. And the software is called blockchain. It's an ingredient in something called Bitcoin. But essentially, these 10 houses constitute a microgrid, and they happen to be across the street from each other. But if this is successful, and if it moves forward, New York State, they really want this to happen, it means the distance wouldn't be much of an issue. You could actually have somebody putting power in one part of the country and somebody else taking it out in another part of the country, and the computers keep track of the entire transaction. Because, you know, this question came up all the time every time Peter goes to a trade show or a meeting. So he says, well, I'm going to put solar power in San Diego, and it's got to go all the way across the country to somebody in New York to use it. And the answer is, well, when you put money in an ATM here and somebody takes money out in an ATM in New York, it isn't the same dollar. It's just money, right? So the fact that there's an infrastructure in place to accept your deposit here and for somebody else to be able to take a withdrawal there and keep track of it, that's really all that we need. And that's what you're going to see thanks to this. This is one way of what they call peer-to-peer energy sales. This could be the Uber of solar. It'll be a really disruptive technology. And this is how you convince the utilities to go along with you. As Buckminster Fuller used to say, you invent something that makes the old technology obsolete. You don't argue with them about the old technology, right? Last but not least, Peter and I were kind of stunned to see this coming out on the wires in March. China's largest utility, State Grid Corporation, has decided that they're going to build an energy internet, a global energy grid. And if this looks familiar, this is the map that Buckminster Fuller designed in the World Game to show how you could interconnect all of the regional grids into a global grid. So that when it's daytime on one side of the planet and nighttime on the other, you could simply move the power from here to here and then 12 hours later move it back again. Well, China's decided they're going to build that. And they're serious. And the reason they have to do it is because the serious problems that they have in China right now are kind of forcing them to move more quickly to the next level. And since it's not a democracy, they can just decide to do it. In fact, one of the articles that came out not too long ago, it said, we've both been talking about it, but they're going to actually just build it. And the good news is that when they do that, assuming that they are going to do that, we're going to see a really good example of whether this works or not. What we've always thought is certainly doable and possible. It'll take $15 to $50 trillion, but you know, it's like when people say, well, who's going to build this? Well, who built the internet? Well, it's not like any one entity built the whole, you know, everybody built their piece of it because we had an open system. We kind of knew what they were going to build, so it would work with yours. And so this is like a three-phase model where they start with regional grids, and then it becomes continental grids, and then it becomes intercontinental grids. And that would happen over a period of 30 years or so. But what they've said is they've got signed agreements now between South Korea, Japan, and Russia have all signed to go in with China and create an Asian mini grid, which would go as far south as the Philippines and as far north as, yeah, the peninsula that goes across the Bering Strait right there next to Alaska. Yeah. Yes, 7 or 8 time zones. And every time you cross the time zone, you create an opportunity to level out power. It's really exciting. And, you know, most people are not paying attention to this, but if this is what you do, you know, this is what you watch for. It's really exciting. So, you know, to take those 4 things and put them all together, you can kind of see what's starting to happen. You start off with putting solar panels on your roof. Eventually, you're selling into a market that's global. I mean, it's really thinking globally, but acting locally. And that's the opportunity that everybody's going to have a chance to have. And you won't even need a roof over your head. You can just have, you know, own some percentage of a neighborhood solar farm, and you'll be able to do the same thing. Just so you don't think I'm making all this up, I asked Peter to run this little video. There's a fellow named Jeremy Rifkin who wrote a book called The Third Industrial Revolution not too long ago. And 2 years ago, in April of 2014, he gave this little talk at Google, a little company called Google. They bring in speakers who, you know, say interesting stuff. And this is what he said at the very end during the question and answer series about that.
Oh, you still have to drive miles, and that cost isn't really changing.
Let's talk about the solar panel or the wind turbine or the geothermal heat pump. You have to pay the fixed cost of the harvesting technology. It probably is going to take you somewhere between 3 and 9 years to pay back on the solar panels. But the moment that panel is up, you keep it clean, the sun is free. Coal is not free. Natural gas, shale gas, uranium, none of that's free. But the sun is free. You just capture it. The wind is free, you capture it. The geothermal heat's free, you capture it. So in that sense, it's near zero. But you're only advantaged if you're in an energy internet that's part of an Internet of Things. Because you may have a lull one day where the sun isn't shining, and you haven't stored that green electricity. Or maybe the wind's blowing at night, but you need the electricity during the day. So we have to create an energy internet that crosses continents. And that way, let's say in Eastern Europe, where it's nighttime, they have a lot of wind, the surplus goes up on the energy internet to the places which are still daytime. Or if you have a lot of sun somewhere in Europe and Western Europe during the day, you put the surplus up on the net, and that energy internet will take it to another part of Europe. So, you know, these energies are intermittent, and they change in different times of the day in different parts of a continent. To the extent that we have an energy internet, we can share our surpluses when other has lulls, and we can, if we store it correctly, hydrogen and other storage technologies, we can deal with peak loads, base loads across continents. That's what we're attempting to do in Germany and in Europe right now. And I was just in China. That was a big surprise to me with China, because I didn't think they were going to be players. The Third Industrial Revolution, my former book, was published there 2 years ago, and the new premier read it in English and instructed the government to now move on a distributed energy internet and to move toward a Internet of Things. I was there in September with the leadership. 10 weeks later, after my meetings with government leadership, the Chinese government announced an $80 billion 4-year commitment to move the distributed energy internet across China so everyone can produce their own energy. By contrast, the U.S. is going to try to raise $3.5 billion over 20 years for a centralized smart grid. So I'm guardedly hopeful, but I think that these are real challenges.
So that was 2 years ago. That was 2 years ago in April of 2014. That was 2 years ago. And of course, Peter's been working on this for 30 years, 25, 30 years. So I mean, this is Buckminster Fuller really came up with this in the 1980s and said that it was inevitable that there would be an energy internet, a global grid. Well, there wasn't an internet in those days, so he just said global energy grid. But because of the intermittent nature of it, and because the way that value carries to the highest market, somebody asked, when you work in this business like I do for solar, you get some interesting questions. And one of the guys asked me, he worked for General Atomics, and he said, this solar that I'm putting into the grid, how far does it go? As far as it has to, that's kind of what I thought too. And I went back to one of my guys, or I might have even asked somebody here. I just said, how far does it go? And the answer is, well, electricity moves at the speed of light. So it moves pretty quick. It moves so fast it could go around the equator 7.5 times a second. I mean, that's how fast electricity works. So as long as there's wires between here and there, the distance is not really the issue. And because everything can be run at a high voltage DC now, there's a way to go 3,000 miles without a significant loss of power. The distance is not really the issue. It happens instantaneously. And so it goes as far as it can go, really, before it hits something else, somebody else uses it. And so we used to say, I used to say a long time ago, if AT&T had ever been in the electric utility business, we probably wouldn't have the model we have today. For better or worse, we'd have a different one, that's for sure. But there's never been an electric utility company that ever thought in larger terms than their own backyard. And it hasn't been changed in over 100 years. And that's really, I think, why things are the way that they are. And the fact that you can now get solar panels and put them on your roof and push the utility to do business with you is why the equation is changing. And that's just going to continue to happen. I found this slide about the digital disruption. It's already happened. The world's largest taxi company owns no taxis. That's Uber. The largest accommodation provider owns no real estate. That's Airbnb. And so on and so on. You go on down the list. The largest software vendor doesn't write any apps. Apple and Google. And I can tell you that pretty soon the largest power company is not going to make any power. You're going to make it. And they may move it around, but they're not going to be in the power making business anymore. They're going to be in the power moving business. And you'll be able to get the investment back faster because you'll be able to get pure market value for the solar power that you're generating. And that's really the vision, no matter where it goes in the world. That's where we're really hoping that it's going to be. Long range, what happens in the world game is that when you have you're doing more and more with less and less, there's more than enough for everybody. But that's another talk. Any questions?
Give him a big hand, will you?
Excellent. Excellent presentation. Love the future developments. Is Stellar Solar going to be venturing down the path of any of those future developments, or are you going to stick to your business model of rooftop solar?
That's a good question. Stellar Solar is going to continue to do what we do, I think. And I can tell you, for me, I think we're always going to be a local company unless somebody decides that they want to make us part of a bigger company. It was so funny when you called me a contractor earlier. It's like, but I am a contractor. I just forget that. I don't think of myself in those terms. But it's as long as it goes on a house, it's going to be a home improvement business. And our experience has been that when large companies go into the home improvement business, it gets harder and harder to manage them. So right now, the fact that we're mainly only doing business in San Diego County, even though we do residential and commercial, I think that's our goal. But for me, as part of my long-term vision, I really wanted to do something that would have an immediate impact besides supporting Peter, and talking about these really long-term global visions. I think some of us thought it was going to happen in a year or two, and it's been a lot longer than that. So certainly let me put it this way. Some of us have lived around long enough. We were here before the internet was here. And what I know about the internet in the beginning, I had some doubts about it. I wasn't sure it was going to be useful. But I was telling Keri earlier, if you remember back to those days when there was email and we could send email, but a few people, were getting into this internet stuff, and it meant you could read articles online, but all the content in the internet was being produced by 3 companies. It was Prodigy, CompuServe, and AOL. And so if you subscribed to one of their services, you could read their articles. And it was pretty dull. And then about 3 years later, the tools were created so that everyone who was hooked to the internet could be a producer. And everybody was putting content up on the web as fast as possible. And so you had millions and millions of producers who formerly were only consumers. And life got really interesting. And so when I look out, at all the houses in San Diego, I see millions and millions of consumers that aren't producers yet. But when they become producers, they're going to think completely differently. And that's when every one of those lines that go into your house becomes a two-way line, not a one-way line. That changes everything. And then it's going to be a brand new business. A lot of different businesses are going to rise up to supply whatever those prosumers need to get their efficiency down. Because every kilowatt hour that you don't use is one you could sell. So there's a built-in incentive to use less power and put more out there to market. It's like if you have a garden in your backyard and it keeps producing tomatoes, you want to eat as few tomatoes as you can so you can sell the rest of it, right? And so that's what those are.
And if I promised you I would share with you what Michael has done with my own personal roof. Up on a couple of these screens here, you can see the 14 panels that are on my roof. Today, it produced 22.4 kilowatts, kilowatt hours of energy. That's the curve over the course of today. It peaks at, because we have a 4 kilowatt system, it maxes out at 10:30 this morning, and it ran solid at maximum output until around 1 o'clock, and then it tailed off until the end of the day, when right now it's not producing anything. But the total output today was 22.4 kilowatts. If I looked at it over kilowatt hours, if I looked at it this month, this was today, that was yesterday, the day before. And so this is a system called, that's the N-phase microinverters that actually feed this through a system that puts it into this program, and I can go online anytime and see the production. So this was the production. I can do it by month, I can do it by days, I can do it by hours, and it's essentially zeroed out my bill. My electricity bill when I got this was zero the first month. Of course, then the second month I bought an electric car. And so that changed because we were starting to plug it in at home because we weren't quite sure it would get to the Blink charger as much. But then we found out my wife normally drives that car daily because her work is right next to one of those charging stations over at Liberty Station. So she'll charge it there. And the brilliant thing about that was, in terms of this particular lease, it was a lease, not a purchase. The company gave us a $2,000 charge card for 2 years. And I said, honey, this is free gasoline. This is free electricity. Just go use this every single day. And we don't need to plug it in at home anymore. So the first couple of months, we were charging it at home just to kind of feel comfortable around that range anxiety. We hardly do that at all anymore because she does it during the day. And so, it's free electricity for the car, free electricity for the house. When I started doing the numbers on this, I went, what am I paying for? It almost zeroes out both transportation and electricity use. So it's a good deal. I'm an advocate.
And let me just add that the chart that Peter's looking at, there's a higher version of that we have as operators, that we actually can see how much power each panel is producing in real time. So if they're all lit up except for one, we know that panel's not working, there's a problem with it. It also allows us to check production against what it's supposed to be without necessarily sending somebody out to the house to double check it. That online monitoring is really something that almost every system now comes standard with. Even the central string inverters now also have wireless monitoring, and it's really just such a savings for not having to dispatch a truck to go figure out what's going on. The older systems, we still have to do that because I can't see what's going on from my office, but for most of the other ones, we know what it's supposed to produce, we know what it is producing, and we know whether there's a problem or not. The part we don't have any control over is how much electricity people are using. If they start turning the thermostat down because the electricity is free and all of a sudden their usage goes up, guess what? Your bill's not zero anymore because you used 10% more than you used last year, or you plugged in an electric car or what have you. Then you need more panels.
I'm going to need more panels. We are, I know, a good half hour over time, and I really do want to acknowledge our two outstanding presenters tonight. Yes? Did you learn a lot? Learned a lot. Thank you both. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Keri. That was outstanding. They do have some literature here on electric vehicles on the incentive program. Michael has a brochure. Please take those along. I know there's a couple of programs next week I want to mention. Paul Michael, you're having one called Crew. Can you tell them what that is real quickly on Monday?